I think a great officer is one who constantly learns in the broadest sense. I think your values grow over time as you grow in the profession. I think your self-development grows over time as you grow in the profession. Of course, how your Army invests in you also helps. But if you're not constantly learning, you're going to stagnate. And as you learn, and if you're surrounded in the right climate, you also have this overstated freedom to fail, but the opportunity to take risk and perhaps not do as well. And then people underwrite that risk because they see it as a growth opportunity. One of the dangers that we have today to the officer corps is that we're training such tactical experts they'll be strategically irrelevant when they reach the positions that we now need them to be strategic thinkers. It goes back to your evolution as an officer. When, as a junior officer, we want you to be a master to craft, love your soldiers, understand how to work with non-commissioned officers, share the values of the profession. When you're a company grade officer, the way I describe it, you should be the master of your branch. You should understand everything about your branch. When you're a field grade officer, a major, lieutenant colonel, you should be a master of combined arms. You should know how to pull all this together. And today I would argue the joint interagency, intergovernmental, multinational aspect of that also has to be included. Then when you're a senior officer, you want to see across the breadth and depth of the organization. And at that level, you also have to understand what you don't know and what you know, and know how to get what you don't know, how to ask the right question. The trouble is when you get deployed cycle after cycle after cycle, that you're becoming more and more tactically proficient. And the expense of that is those experiences that allow you to ask the right question, to develop those networks that you can reach into to answer the questions you're inevitably going to be asked as a senior leader. I use a phrase sometimes, the Army's never met a requirement it doesn't like. And so it comes down to priorities. And so we have to identify those officers that we think have the potential to be senior leaders early and make sure they get the broadening opportunities. And that has to be a big enough bench that as it goes forward, we can deal with the retention issues, with the health issues, and with all the other permutations that deal with trying to project forward 10 years. But right now, we can't just let it happen by accident. And right now, it's a pretty brutal competitive system. And as some of the promotion boards seem to indicate, what people are basing those promotions on is the amount of time you're spending on operational deployments. That may not be the best measure of success for the future of the Army. It's good for today, but it may not be good for 10 years today. And I'll caveat it like this. When I start the new class with the majors, I give them a little phrase. 10 years from now, you'll be known as the Iraq guys who don't get it. Because whatever conflict will be in then, and we will be in something if you just look at our history, that will be completely different than what we're facing today. So the question is, are you adaptable enough and agile enough to adapt and not be trapped by your own experiences? Often, especially before we had this ACU uniform, you could look at an officer, you could tell his branch, you could tell what schools they've been to, you could tell where they were deployed or not deployed, and you would draw conclusions, erroneously so, on what their talents may be. Now we don't wear our branch on the collar, but for example, when I commanded the brigade combat team, it was very interesting how I was treated as an engineer, as opposed to the other brigade commanders, until they figured out I was a brigade commander, and everything would shift. And that shows the power of signaling. But that can be overcome. And after Desert Storm, I was one of those that didn't go, and I don't carry a lot of the signals that you would expect a future battalion and brigade commander would have. And so, what I did do is I went back and I'd been doing a lot of reading. I had my own personal reading program at that point, and I looked at General Eisenhower. And General Eisenhower, he didn't have any of this coming out of World War I. He was one of those that never deployed. And yet, look what happened 20 years later. And he stuck with it and persevered, continued to study. He had some great mentors. He worked in really difficult jobs. If you look at that in the Philippines, working for General MacArthur. And it set him up well for what we asked him to do in the future. I think the officer evaluation form is fundamentally flawed. And I know the Army's going to relook that in 2011. I think that's way past its time. It also is related to how long we leave officers in command or in their key developmental jobs. And there is a healthy tension there between what's best for the force while deployed and what's best to develop the future talent of the Army. I find it amazing that we evaluate a second lieutenant on the same form that we evaluate a brigade combat team commander. I don't know how we could possibly draw the senior leaders that we want off a form that we're using in that broad of a manner. And I think there should probably be 2 or 3 different forms that go after the skills and attributes and knowledge that we expect these officers to have. And then there has to be a way to discriminate among them so that we know we're promoting the right people for the right jobs for the future of the Army. The argument that I make for officers today is you have to be able to learn faster and adapt faster. Technology is advancing so fast, but it can be replicated just as fast. Any technological advantage we have is gone in a year. It's gone. And let's look at the racing industry. The racing industry, if somebody came up with a new engine, they'd all have it in a year. So what makes us think we're going to stay on this huge technological advantage? It's not the technology, it's your ability to adapt faster, learn faster, innovate faster. That's what we have to get out of our officers. We have to reward those that can do that.